Hey, this is Kyle Crawford from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Crimers Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Crimers Beer House was started in 1982 by the Crimer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Crimers Beer House.
Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson, being joined by my pain in the rear end partner, Kyle Crawford.
Well, you know,
there's a reason why I called you that, Kyle. You know that.
I was going to come in here and apologize. You know, Jenny even said.
Apologize?
Jenny even said our last show. She's like, "Well, you were kind of mean to Merle."
Yeah.
All
I
right,
was licking my wounds.
I'm sorry, Merle. I apologize. And then what you just said at the beginning of the show, I just take it all back.
Yeah, right. He pulls in my driveway today, and he's got, you know, his big old pickup truck, and he's got a tie down that's hanging like 10 feet out of the back, dragging on the road. He just looks like a classic hillbilly coming down the road. Nice.
Trying to be like you, Merle.
Let's get to what we're doing. Everybody can see we've got a guest.
Yes,
here.
we have a guest.
So
yes.
We're going to have some great conversation today. Here at Strong Dads, we are, Kyle and I talked about the idea of stretching ourselves and stretching you guys out there that are listening, stretching ourselves in terms of being more Christ-like. Christ calls us to love one another. He calls us to serve one another. He calls us to take care of one another. And that is all well and good when you're doing it with people that are in your inner circle, people that you like, people that function like you. But there's all kinds of people out there that we are called to do that with. And so Kyle and I had some conversation about, like, you know, when was the last time you talked to ... You know, somebody who is not of your circle, or maybe maybe it was at one time in your circle, but you've stepped out. Yeah. And so we've got some shows coming up, everything talking about the folks that are maybe homeless or have gone through tragedy. But today we have a returning guest, Tyler Schmidt. Welcome to Strong Dads Round 2.
That's right.
All right. Our last show with you was like episode 84 and 85.
Yep, it was a two-parter. Yep.
Right. And with that show, we introduced the LIT movement, which is Living in Testimony, right?
Yes, sir.
And you guys, how's LIT movement going?
So LIT's going great. We opened our third house a few months back. We're housing about 28 to 30 guys at any given time. And currently trying to expand into women's recovery as well. So had a pretty successful golf outing fundraiser a few months ago. And so now our targets are on opening an extension for women housing.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are right now.
That's awesome.
Great. Well, the reason why we have Tyler on here is because our question was, when was the last time you talked with or just did life with an addict? Yep. And we really wanted to broaden the realm of what addict means, just because, man, this world and your flesh desire a lot of things that will feed it, right? Whether it's pornography, drugs, money, work, there's always something that can really feed you to the point of addiction, right? Yep. But you're on the front lines. And so we thought, who better to bring in and just ask some real serious questions about, okay, what's the right way to interact in terms of being loving, but also being challenging, right? But also trying to learn from people, but also pouring the right thing into these folks, especially when we know anymore, like, it's not like this addict is somebody that's in the inner city that, you know, I don't see. These are folks in my life. They're in all of our lives, right?
Which I think is the hope, you know, with this series that we're doing. Man, we're going to actually be putting faces in relation to people who have dealt with addiction, who have dealt with homelessness. You know, I think it's important to do that, especially as Strong Dads, because I know myself sometimes when you start to, you know, you categorize people and you put these people in groups, whether it be addicts or homeless, sometimes you almost see yourself as better than them, and to put a face to them and to put their story and what they've experienced in relation to that, man, I think when you really bring a human factor back into it, that Christ-like mindset, to know that these people go through stuff just like we do, and we have to have compassion for that.
Right, right. So let's thank a couple sponsors, and let's get into just some great conversation. Kyle, you want to start us off there?
Yeah, for sure. Strong Dads, we would like to thank Crimer's Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Crimer's Beer House started in 1982 by the Crimer family down in Route 128. Go down there, check them out. Let Mark know we sent you down there. Go check them out. Incredible setting, really good food. Get some pork chops. So
go get the chops. Also, we want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for coming alongside of Strong Dads. So for all of your landscaping needs, hardscapes, or even decorating, go check out Casey's Outdoor Solutions, located outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana. So they have incredible just inventory right now of gifts and mums as we are in that fall season. So lots going on there. So, all right. So a couple of things. Let's just talk first. What is your experience, Tyler, with being an addict personally? Like, how did you just fall into that? Just so that we have some reference point.
Sure. So I guess, it all started back in high school where, some, I guess you could say traumatic, and traumatic is relevant, trauma for someone else. For someone could be something different for another person. It could be different from a male to a female. But when some trauma entered my life and kind of disrupted, my norm, I started to seek things outside of myself for comfort, and whether it be validation from friends and participating in, drinking and smoking. And it kind of evolved into, more and more things, substances, when I kind of started to dabble in that, it was like, I feel at home. It feels like a go-to for, medicating that trauma or whatever, discomfort. I think for so many years, I'm just trying to seek comfort in life. And when you find something that kind of fits that, that feels good to the flesh, it's easy to progress at a fast pace. So that's what happened to me. I just progressed, through the years. And as I graduated high school and got to more like being independent, where I could do whatever I wanted because I didn't have the accountability of my parents anymore, it just progressed to bigger and crazier things. And, and then you factor in like being, kicked out of the military, losing a few jobs, going through a few breakups. And then, that progresses into a place where I'm dabbling with drugs that are severely addicting. You get into, heroin, which is, a whole nother level. All the pain pills, Oxycontins, methadone, the list goes on. But once I started to dabble into those, it was very hard to get out of those chains. And then for many years, it became a process of trying to break those chains, finding temporary relief, and then getting another chain on me, and going back and forth. And so that's kind of how I got to where the addiction took me, to homelessness, to not being employable, not being able to maintain relationships in my life, and just feeling that like suicidal annihilation of everything in my life.
When did you, or did you have an active thought of I'm hooked or I'm an addict? How did that take place in your mind?
Or
did somebody else have to call it out for you and tell you were?
Well, I think the court systems and whatnot, as I got in trouble, would put labels on me. I don't think I thought, like I'm an addict. I can remember one particular time when I was living with my dad because just nothing was panning out, and I might have been at a shelter, and he was like, you can come stay with us for a while. And I think he was, he married a few years, and they lived in a nice house, and I brought all my drama into the house, and I remember like just. It got really bad. I was living with my dad, and it was like 4 a.m. I like woke him up, like, Dad, I'm addicted to heroin. Like that was what I woke him up to. And in the morning, like we went to like a methadone clinic, and he, kind of helped me there, and that turned into even more disaster. But I remember like coming to him, like knowing the chain is so powerful, and like I need to address it with somebody who loves me, who cares for me. And so I remember that particular time. That was probably, when I was mid-20s.
Yeah. So what happens, like, in your mind, going through kind of the different phases that your mind and body can be in when you're actually high, when you're withdrawing, when you're recovering, and when you're sober? Like, when, because we see relapse all the time. Mm-hmm. What makes a sober person decide to go back to being high again? If you know that, man, that was a train wreck in my life right there. What? Because I've got addictions to silly things like sugar. Okay, which maybe that's not silly, but it is, right? What makes you go back?
Yeah. So it's kind of a complex question and answer to it. But so what is bringing the men like at Lit out of that pit of addiction?
Yeah,
is seeking the Lord. No doubt the Lord is fueling the power to make that happen. But it's basically living and pursuing these spiritual principles that are all biblical. The main tool in the toolkit is the 12 steps. But at the core of all that, it's basically biblical precepts and principles that people, that these men are applying to their lives, like self-examination, prayer, kind of addressing that ego, shattering that, and looking at their past and where was their trauma, where is their fear, where is their harm in relationships. And in like going through that process, that spiritual work, it totally radically heals your spirit. And a lot of times the trauma that bruised your spirit from way back, it's like the work brings about the healing to heal that. And then the byproduct of your spirit being healed, the byproduct of that is being able to operate in truth. And so if you're operating in truth, let's say if you're only operating in 20% truth, meaning you're pretty delusional and you're addicted. Well, when you're operating in 100% truth, you therefore have the power to turn down the things that you see that are deadly to you. Because if you weren't operating in truth, you'd be operating in deception, which, you go back to things. It's like when someone, like an alcoholic goes back to alcohol, relapses, has a brief moment of sobriety, and then they go back to drinking. It's almost like they forgot that. Almost like their ability to operate in truth and power is lacking. They lack that ability of power to not pick up the alcohol, right?
Yeah.
So back to the spiritual work at hand, when guys are doing this work, it just brings about this healing in the spirit that gives them the power to do that. So to answer your question, what will take someone back? Well, a lot of the guys I see, especially in our house, they will start the work, and it's almost like having the willingness and even inching forward will bring about the protection and healing to not turn back to drugs. But when they stop the process, it's like the spirit starts to regress, and the power and truth in which they were operating in seems to like dissolve quickly. So it's like as long as they're on the path and moving forward, there seems to be this spiritual protection and power that flows within them. But a lot of guys, what will happen, and this is sad, I see this a lot, but they will start the process, they will examine their lives, look at all this harm, God will revelate them, bring them to a lot of truth in their life, and then they'll be looking at what they have to do. Like the next step in really the self-examination is to clear up some of this wreckage, right? And some of it could be from baby mama, parents, employers, all this, and their life kind of gets restored to some extent. They get a good job, maybe they get their license back. Then they put the work down because they feel like, okay, we're good now, and they don't address all the work that was revealed, that God revealed through self-examination. And what happens is their spirit starts to slowly regenerate and go back, and you see their character start to dissolve, and the things that used to haunt them and be troublesome to them start to come about in their lives again.
Wow.
And so you see a lot of guys with 6 months or a year clean who start the work and don't finish it because life's all right now. and they got a girlfriend, and so why would you want to go back?
Yeah.
Why would you want to go back and pay all the people you stole from and all this when you have X, Y, Z now and you're operating?
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, fall short with that process because of that.
That's huge. So I'm thinking about I know a lot of guys that drank. I'll say drinking. I'm not as familiar with the drug scene as the drinking scene. Drink for pleasure and fun, but it's to the point now where it's daily, right? Does that person have an addiction problem and something broken in the spirit, even though they're functional? I don't know if that's a fair question or not, but
so from what I've seen, there is this imaginary line that a hard drinker who drinks like they want to, and then it progresses to maybe drinking every day. There is this imaginary line that once they cross that, it's hard to stop that. And if they're past that line and they can't stop, then it turns into something else beyond their control, an addiction.
Gotcha.
Right? But there are some hard drinkers, and this is in the AA book, there are some hard drinkers who, if something becomes operative in their life or warning from a doctor, like, hey, you're going to die, then that is enough for them to just shut it down and stop.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah.
So Tyler, I have a question. When you were talking before about the idea of the truth, right? I know when it comes to the first responder world, I'm not the only one who has questioned this before. So we will respond quite often for overdoses, for men, women that have overdosed, and we will enter that house. We will give them the Narcan to bring them out of their high, their overdose. And Tyler, I don't know what it is, but without fail, we wake them up from a state of they're essentially dead, right? We bring them back, and without fail, they lie right away. Because they've gone from this state where they are not breathing or not breathing very well, right? And we bring them back and we'll say, "What's your drug of choice?" "Oh, I don't do drugs."
Yeah.
And it is confusing. It's hard to wrap my mind around that world. I've never been in that state. But to go from a state of dead to a state of alive and automatically you're lying, is that part of the truth you were talking about, or?
Yeah. So that is when I think of that. This is what I think of. It's like if your mother had like stage 4 cancer and you're like, "Mom, hey, we're supposed to be at the gym today. Why aren't you at the gym?" You want, treat your mom like that because she's a sick person. The same way with the addict. You wouldn't expect them, "Hey, why don't you tell me the truth?" Because they're sick. It's almost like they don't have the power to flow in that.
Okay.
So it's the same kind of deal. Like there's a lot of literature in, the recovery books that says, you treat them, meaning the addict or alcoholic, like a sick person. And so, pray for them and be careful what you expect out of them, because, you wouldn't expect certain things out of a sick person the same way with an addict or an alcoholic.
So
does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, so when we bring these patients out of, that state, are you like saying that we shouldn't ask them, or you're saying treat them more like they are sick? They have it is a disease.
Mm-hmm. So if someone is that far gone to where they're overdosing and all that, that deep down in that addiction, to expect them to operate in their character with integrity and honesty, you can't expect that from them. So really, it's a matter of how can I plug them into the right resources in order to get them for their brain to be open for business.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, that's great stuff there, because I think sometimes we approach addicts with our brain.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get why you don't get this.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they're not able to. That's not how they're functioning at that time. So let's maybe go down that road a little bit, because we're talking about when was the last time you talked to an addict.
Yeah.
So how do I approach an addict? How do I... especially if they're a close family member, how do I approach them in a way that still shows love and respect, but doesn't, basically feed their addiction? Mm-hmm. How do I do that?
So when I hear that, I think of two parts. So one would be the person who's in active addiction, right? So obviously, being able to maintain healthy boundaries is like the biggest thing, right? Because some people think, I just need to get them to church and this is going to solve the problem. And I'm not saying church isn't good and all that, but someone who's in active addiction, their brain is totally not open for business to receive spiritual things a lot of the times. Now God can intervene, and I've seen, a few occasions where, people have just been, really touched. But I think in general, it is more of a complex thing where, connecting them to resources that are going to really allow them to have a period of time without drugs in their system. So then they're able to receive, more help to get them on the path. So obviously, lending money is really big. People always think, well, he's homeless and he don't have a job and, he just needs this or that. He needs gas. And so, addicts are very manipulative as far as getting resources, money, and all that. So you can be, a distant family member and see someone going through, be like riding the street, maybe flying a sign, or having a vehicle, and then I'd come over, but I don't have enough gas to get over there. And so there's all these little things that addicts will say and do in order to get money or whatever kind of resource that may produce money to get what they really want.
So how much should I trust them? Like if they say I need money, should I ever give money? Should I ever give a place to live? Should I give them a ride? What's my level of boundary that I should use?
Yeah, so
that?
I would never let an addict live in my house, period, because really that doesn't solve the problem. You're just a nurse for their wounds kind of deal. They need to really seek medical attention, as far as, treatment, et cetera, stuff like that, detox, which there's tons of resources. We have a new program now at Lit where we can bring someone off the street 24/7 who's actually high and dirty, and house them, up to 72 hours, but if they're willing to go to treatment. So we usually connect them within 24 hours to detox or treatment. Because that was the one thing we were having problems with doing outreach. 8 p.m., you got Joe Schmo who doesn't have a house or a phone who wants help, and so we're able to bring them in, just short kind of triage housing kind of deal.
Right, yeah.
So, but some people try to do that on their own. We have, peer support specialists that work 24/7 that are really hip to all the little, lies and manipulation. We pat them down, really good because, addicts will sneak drugs in your house if you let them stay with you. Yeah. So there's all these things that even my guys now, I was just, writing some notes on how to tighten up on a few areas and even just searches, because someone may think, hey, they're my nephew and they have nowhere to stay. I'm going to stay with my house. Well, they might be sneaking drugs in and all that. So you got to know kind of what to expect and, sneaking people in your house, women, drugs, whatever it may be, you just don't know. You can't trust them. Like I said, if they're addicted and in that bondage, they lack the power to really be trustworthy. 99.9% of the time.
So you're talking with money, housing,
all the above,
transportation, right?
Yeah.
But you're not kicking him to the street. You're saying here's a resource like the Lit movement or any kind of sobriety house kind of thing. Here's a place for you. I'd even be willing to drive you there.
Yep.
But that's kind of where it'll stop.
It's really all about resources. Even myself, when I remember after that moment I told you where I told my dad, hey, I'm addicted. From that point on, I went on to look for how do I kind of navigate this problem and seek help. So I banged my head, got turned around, had to go here, go there, try this medication, that medication, try this, shelter, this treatment center. So I've done a lot, and really what it boils down to is knowing the right resources to expedite, the process. Because you can think, well, they seem to go to a sober house. Well, no sober houses will take them because you got to be sober coming in. So someone who's addicted in active addiction needs definitely detox and then treatment for at least 30 days or more.
Wow.
So even to get into our house, we'll bring them into the short-term refuge part of it for a day or two, and then we'll connect them to treatment. They do the program, graduate, we'll bring them back for the housing piece. So there's even little stuff like that, and what it boils down to is knowing the right resources, what they provide, or knowing the players on the field who can, connect you, and you can give the number to to them to make the call, and they can connect, the person, really quickly and stuff. So I think it's about resources, knowing what to say. Hey, look, I want to help you, but this is really what you need. You need to, contact this person who can help you plug in to get the help you need. And then let's talk about maybe employment, housing, all this kind of stuff on the back end. Because a lot of people think too, like, hey, he just needs a good job, right? And that's never the case. It's almost like more money, the more you're going to expedite their death, because if you can't manage, $1, how are you going to manage, $20 an hour?
So I mean, when we talk about, if we do have someone in our family, and statistics probably would show that because it is such a problem in our society now, man, as a parent, as a sibling, a cousin, whatever, a relative of someone who is an addict, man, I'd imagine rejection from the addict wanting that help and the resources. So what would you suggest, or walk us through the idea of you have a kid, a strong dad out there has a kid who is going through addiction, and they want to be that resource, that they want to plug their child into those systems, but then there's rejection. Like how much is too much? How much should we be willing to push to get them plugged in?
Sure. So, like, basically what you're asking me is, like, how should a parent deal with the tough love and the what that creates? So, I was thinking about this the other day. I was dealing with something. It was one of our guys where it was like, just needed that hard rebuke, and it was like, whatever, you'll thank me later kind of deal. Right. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's kind of the same scenario where, the addict, their mind's cloudy, they're operating in a lot of deception, dishonesty, selfishness is flowing, right? It's almost like they can't see or hear, in reality, you know what I'm saying? Because they're just, distorted, So if you come with that tough love, what I've seen the majority of the time is once that person gets help and all that, and they come back around, they're going to be like, man, I held that resentment for so long, but really I see how that kind of got me on this path to get help. And you see a lot of guys that are going back to their parents, cleaning it up, taking ownership. Hey, look, this is what I did. I need to make this right. What can I do? Because they see the truth and kind of what that produced. And in the beginning it stings, but like if they do get help, I've seen almost every guy kind of see the big picture on how that really propelled them to the right direction in order to get better, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I wouldn't be discouraged on like, what are they going to think and are they going to be mad at me kind of deal? Because you're talking about someone's life. I mean, people are overdosing like on a very high rate, and dying. I've been to a few funerals the past, month. And, so not every addict is going to take heed to, the direction or the suggestion. Yeah. So that there is that as well. But it's
almost that tough love though. I mean, that I know from my experience with dealing with addiction, as far as, making runs on patients who have overdosed, man, I feel like in general, a general statement, the first responder world, we find ourselves in that tough love world more so than the more of the nurturing, just because of the circumstances. We're there, we have an immediate, that needs to be fixed, right? It has to be fixed right now. Mm-hmm. So with an addict, how do addicts typically respond? And maybe this may be very generalizing, but how do addicts typically respond to just in general society's tough love sometimes versus, because again, I know for us a lot of times it's we wake them up, man, what are you doing? Like, you got to get out of this world, right? But I have no relationship with that person. Mm-hmm. I've almost not even earned that right to even speak those words to them. So how do addicts fall into getting almost like beat down from society so much that tough love comes off negatively because it's from someone that's not in their world, like in their relation? Like, does that make sense?
Are you kind of asking like how is there a solution, or how do you change that of stereotype or that dynamic? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I don't think you're gonna change that. That is a tough job. Like a lot of other jobs in the recovery field are just tough, Because you got to bring you just got to bring a certain dynamic to the table every time. It's not about, hey, let's sit here and hang out for a little bit and let me win you over kind of deal.
Yeah.
You're probably in and out. So, I guess the only thing I could say to that is, when you come with the tough love, have a solution. Hey,
Right.
I like
boom,
that, yeah.
come with the hammer of truth. But hey, look, when you're ready, here you go. Here's this card or whatever.
Yeah.
We've given our cards out to a few,
That's
first
good, yeah.
responders.
I think the hard part about this for a parent or for any of us that deal in this is we want to be able to save them, especially like as a parent. Like, I'll do anything, right? But at the end of the day, the sobriety comes only through them.
Correct.
Right? Like, it comes through their commitment, and these are hard. Seems like hard, cold words, but there are going to be people who die.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be people who die because that's how ugly it is, and not every person can be saved because you aren't saving them. They're going to have to come within themselves and their own spirit and to heal that way. And so, the harshness of it is, you are not their savior, but like. It sounds cold. I'm working with several guys that are in this right now, and I can feel it when I'm speaking with them that I'm delivering, I will say, tough love. I'm delivering a toughness to them, and they don't like it. Now, these guys are sober right now, but because they've broken so much trust along the way in marriages, with kids, with jobs, that for me, I'm trying to heal the family and get the trust restored. But in the meantime, I'm putting the burden of trust building on the addict. And they want to be sober for a week and go, okay, I'm good now. Everybody accept me back. And it's not that way. And so when you deliver that toughness, I spoke with a gentleman not too long ago, and he says, like, I just feel like when I come here, like, I'm getting beat back down. And it's hard because I'm like, no, I mean, you made these choices and you hurt these people. This is the wall you have to build again. You got to build this house again. And it's that fine line of, I don't want to frustrate them and beat them down so much that they throw their hands up. But I also don't want to say, it's okay, buddy. We'll let you go have your family back. So, what are some ways that when you deal with somebody who gets angry at you, when you've delivered the tough, and they get angry at you, what is your final handling of them, knowing that they might do something stupid? I mean, you don't kick them to the curb, or do you? Do you say, well, fine, hit the road? I mean, you've kicked guys out of your house before, I know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Kind of depends. Sometimes if there's certain lines that are crossed, you have to stand firm and bring the tough love, and that might be kicking someone out, or it could be
knowing full well it might lead to an overdose or a death.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, because what you see a lot is family members just keeping the party bumping for them. They have a fallback plan all the time, and so that keeps the addiction just going and going for years, you know? So there's that. As far as myself, I do get into issues with guys sometimes where I have to, stand firm and not budge, and they feel some type of way. And, it's like, well, look, this is the type of willingness that you're going to need to bring in order to keep moving. If you have that willingness, I'll meet you halfway kind of deal. Because the addict is responsible for the recovery. You know what I'm saying? Right. There's a saying, I think it's like, you're not responsible for the harm caused to you or the trauma that happened to you, but you're responsible for your recovery kind of deal.
Right.
So, and there is, whenever you're trying to help somebody or myself, I can only match somebody's willingness. I can't carry, the burden or do it for them.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it comes to, hey, look, here's the truth. This is what's going to require. I'll meet you here, but you're going to need to meet me 50% with the willingness, and the willingness might look like X, Y, Z. And a lot of times if you can demonstrate that, I do love you. And look, here's how I've demonstrated that.
Yeah.
But you're going to need to meet some here. And this is maybe what that looks like. So kind of painting it out for them and showing them like, the sacrifice I'm willing to put in, and that might be time or whatever, because time is valuable. And if you're taking time to meet somebody, a lot of times, I'm going to, I'm super busy, and going to meet a guy who may be, on the fence or whatever. It's like, look, I'm taking time out of my busy day.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need you to meet me here because I got all this stuff going on, and I love you.
Seeing what their commitment is to it. So that idea, like I want to feel sad for them when they're falling, but I don't want to feel responsible for them.
Yes.
Right? Like ultimately it is their responsibility. And I think that's one of the things that we find with addicts, that they're always is a big word, but they're into responsibility shifting, right? Like it's somebody else's deal.
Yep.
So Tyler, this is great stuff, especially because I see it from a family perspective. We're always trying to reach into a family member, right, that's got this, and we want to just snap our fingers and get them to a healthy place. So as we start to wrap up here, what are some absolute don'ts? Don't do this with an addict, like how we might speak with them. What are some things that we think in our mind might be good, but no, just don't do that?
Well, what has came up in the past, I'd say 6 months, that just talking with family members and whatnot, what I've had to say, definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
It's, buy them a hotel room, because that comes up a lot. Well, just get them a hotel room.
Just give them for a couple nights.
Do not believe how often that comes up. But in the same sense, don't let them stay with you unless you have, some backup. Like if you have, there's been a very rare occasion, and I'm married and whatnot, but where I'll have someone, this is very rare, and it wouldn't happen now because we got the short-term refuge kind of housing piece to catch guys. But, where I've let someone crash on my couch because we have a bed at the treatment center the next morning. So, and that's like me, who I'm like, I'm willing to do battle,
right.
right. But, because people steal stuff middle of the night, anything can happen, right? And you can't trust anything they're saying. So letting someone stay with you or buying them a hotel room, that's one thing.
Absolutely not. The
money situation too, if it's more than $5, I just I would never do that. And if it's like you need food or whatever, okay, here, I'll go buy you this food.
Right.
Yeah.
But just be cautious on how much you buy, because people will go return food for money.
Yeah.
Or whatever. They'll return stuff.
That's true. Like not go buy bags of
or
groceries.
Clothes or whatever, even clothes,
Yeah.
It's like, let's go back to TJ Maxx and get the gift card and sell the gift card, whatever.
Wow.
So it's resources. Knowing when to give and how much to give is really what it's all about. You know what I'm saying? When dealing with an addict. And putting responsibility into the addict's hands. So if you're a parent, you got a kid, hey, run your little sister down here. Just putting responsibility where you're going to need some, some integrity involved. Don't shift the responsibility to the addict to do something just because, they're the family member or whatever.
Right, even if they're the older brother, and they're going to take little sister to school or a practice or whatever, that could be disastrous.
Yeah.
Just that same idea that your brain's not open for business. Like they're not able to function in that world.
Yep. Let's see, what else?
How about so I think one of the things that, Kyle, you mentioned this, I think earlier, just the idea that, especially as a first responder, and you've given this guy Narcan 3 different times or whatever, and you get short with people, right? You get like, oh, come on already. How many times do I have to do this?
Yeah.
But you're speaking from a more healthy mindset, and they're not open for that business.
Yeah.
So how do you talk to them respectfully? They are still a human.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
That we're not writing them off.
Yep.
How do you talk to them respectfully without just being a total jerk to them?
Sure. So, when I talk, I'm very, matter of fact. Hey, look, this is the decision I'm making, and this is why I'm standing on this. And reaffirming, I love you, but also being cool with, even if they freak out and say, and blame and all this, because you see that a lot where parents and in relationships where, some of these females will just get bombarded with, you don't love me, and just guilt tripping and throwing all this dirt. And so, I would just say, be firm on what you say, stand on it, reinforce that you love them, and not getting crazy when how you deliver that. But then also just know that you may get slung some dirt back.
Yeah.
But you don't have to respond like that. It's real easy to respond and hate or whatever. But it's like, reinforce the boundaries. Hey, you can't stay with me. I'm sorry, I can't give you resources. This is why I love you. Here's a resource. Call this, and staying firm in that. And just know you may get some flack and some heat coming your way, but you don't have to respond. And just know that their brain is very cloudy. Yeah. So try to hurt people. And they, you see a lot of guys trying to, throw some hurt back because they were wounded themselves. And so just know that you may have to deal with that. You're not going to change that. You're not going to change them, their selfishness, and get them to, oh, well, you're right. You probably won't get that. So just know, expect you may get, an assault coming your way. So,
yeah.
Well, speaking of resources, I mean, I would love all of our strong dads and any listener viewers out there to be able to reach out to Lit if they know somebody or if they're in the midst of it. So give a plug for Lit Movement for sure. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So you can get a hold of us at www.thelitmovement.org. Our new program, the Short-Term Refuge. Like I said, right now it just houses men. So that's like triage housing. If you have an addict who's dirty, 24/7, you can call the number. I'll give it to Merrill. We have a flyer with all the information on the criteria, and pretty much, we take about anybody.
Right. I'll put it in the show notes so anybody can reach out to that.
Yeah, and the contact number will be in there as well. Yeah.
Man, that's great. Yeah. So this conversation could go a long time, especially when you talk into all of the individual cases. Everyone's got a case for that. But one of the things that we'd like to reach out with is if you need help, you've got information there about the Lit Movement. If you just need to run some ideas by somebody, give me a call at Rock Solid Families, and that number is 812-576-7625. These are not easy decisions and words to get out there, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's different circumstances, whether the resources, the connection to the person, whatever it is, there's different levels of need. So showing love sometimes looks different than what we think it might look like, right? And so this is a tough thing. So the one thing I would advocate for is don't just slam your door and not talk, but put boundaries on how you talk, right? Show, as you said, tell them that you love them, but keep those boundaries strong, right? Tyler, you got any last words? I know we could go on forever and ever, but I'm going to respect your time there.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking when you were saying, showing love and showing love in truth, and the truth is sometimes, you can think, well, they don't have any money, or they don't have, gas in their car. And you can think from carnal eyes that, oh, they just need some money. But the truth is, they will manipulate that and use it for different reasons than they're telling you. So, the truth, loving somebody in truth just looks different, because the truth can sometimes look different in the world of an addict. Yeah. So sometimes when you think something could be good, it is not, for various reasons. And that's why having someone who can help you navigate that, a counselor, one of us who can kind of direct people who don't know.
I like
the world of an
what
addict.
You're saying there, that whole idea, because truth gets distorted, and it's like lit is living in testimony, but it also is living in truth. Right? That whole idea of boiling it down to what is really true here. Money's not the problem.
Exactly.
The problem is something much deeper. So great stuff. We're going to have some other shows coming up, talking to Ken Madden, who started the Community Blessing Boxes in the Southeast Indiana area. That show will be coming up later next week, and dealing with the homeless there. So that's going to be a great conversation, because sometimes those are situations that we try to avoid. That gets messy. messy, right? And these are all messy situations, right?
But I think a strong dads, again, that's what we said at the beginning of the show. These are the conversations we need to be having with each other.
Yeah.
Like we can't be fearful of these tough conversations. Like, we're strong dads here. We have to talk about it. I mean, let's again putting a face next to these discussions, I think is so powerful. I know it is for me, especially I'm being so intimately familiar with the addiction world, because I respond to it all the time. So Tyler, thanks so much for coming here and coming back.
Love it.
Yeah, you're one of the few guests that have come back.
You're a repeat offender.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Yeah, so thanks so much for coming back. Thanks so much for Crimer's Beer House, Casey Outdoor Solutions, coming alongside of us. Really do appreciate it. Stay tuned. We're putting out this whole month, the month of October, will be this series we got going on. So really appreciate you guys. Go out there and be some strong dads.
Tyler, thank you.
Thanks.
You got one last thing you want to say?
Oh, love you guys. Thanks.
Good deal. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.